Introduction to Mass Communications, Chapter 2, Types of Communication. Types of communication: intrapersonal, interpersonal, group communication, mass communication. Intrapersonal, interpersonal, and group communication can occur without the intermediary of an external medium or channel, that is to say, a device to amplify or transmit/receive the interaction over distance, like phone calls, text messages, email, so they are designated micro-level communications. Mass communication, on the other hand, to reach a diverse swath of audience over a broad geographic area, requires a broadcast medium to reach the masses, designating it as macro-level communication. The two axes of distinction model. We do understand that there might be some confusion when it comes to making distinctions between micro and macro levels of communication, since even micro-level communications require the use of a medium when the participants aren't in each other's visual or auditory proximity, and also the fact that there are media that span micro and macro levels. For this reason, we have devised a two-factor or two-axes model with an accompanying graphic to help you visualize the distinction a little more clearly. The first axis, number of participants. This refers to the number of participants in the communication process. The higher the number, the closer to macro-level communication we get. We start to think in terms of audience rather than parties or participants. Often, there are micro-level scenarios in group communication that still include a fairly high number of participants due to occurring in organizational settings like businesses, classrooms, and conferences, which might lead one to inaccurately classify them as macro-level, which brings us to our second axis. Second axis, reciprocity of the medium. The second axis, reciprocity of the channel/medium, helps make the important distinction between micro and macro levels of communication. Reciprocity is the extent to which the channel accommodates two-way interaction. You see, the less reciprocal the medium, the less personalized the content, the more it is a broadcast rather than conversational medium. Therefore, the more likely its use is a feature of macro-level communication. Some media, like email, written correspondence, and telephone, are able to scale their functions in a trade-off between conversational personalization and reciprocity, access to response mechanisms, and the macro-level batching of bulk emails, telephonic town halls, social media posts versus messaging. I think it's important to qualify that even the media in macro-level communication aren't completely devoid of the means to respond to the message and provide feedback in forms of letters to the editor, correspondence with media outlets, or even booing or cheering in response to a message delivered over a public address system as an audience or attendee at mass communication events. There are some media that take up a small bandwidth on the continuum, like TV broadcasting or newspapers and periodicals in macro-level communication. The more personalized and immediate micro-level interactivity of journaling takes up such a narrow bandwidth to the extent that the channel is a de facto participant in the communications process. Some media, like written correspondence, command a larger bandwidth on the continuum because they are scalable from heartfelt, handwritten missives to impersonal form letters. Emails are also scalable from micro-level two-party conversation to macro-level mass marketing and political bulk emails with call to action, CTA links, and you can't reply to this email verbiage. Here is a pretty infographic we developed to help you visualize the difference between micro and macro levels of communication. At the end of the day, the two distinguishing factors between micro and macro levels of communication are 1. Whether the participants are few enough in number that one can access them either as personal or organizational contacts and interact with them in real time, and 2. At what point the channel or medium of the communication assumes the considerably less personalization and fewer reciprocal traits in its use in more of a broadcast rather than a conversational mode. Or even more simply, mass communications are macro level despite using some channels shared with micro level communications. 1. Intrapersonal communication. Intrapersonal communication refers to any verbal, written, or mental conversation you have with yourself. Intrapersonal communication might range from thinking about what you want to wear today, to what to eat for breakfast, to solving a complex problem in your head. Journaling, food and exercise diaries, vision boards, or systems of personal notes and reminders to oneself are also examples of intrapersonal communication. 2. Interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication, also known as face-to-face communication, is the process through which people exchange information, emotions, and meaning through verbal and nonverbal messages. Interpersonal communication encompasses not just what is said, the language employed, but also how it is delivered, as well as the nonverbal cues sent through tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. Communication occurs when two or more people are in the same place and are aware of each other's presence, no matter how subtle or inadvertent. An observer may use posture, facial expression, and clothing signals to build an impression of the other's role, emotional state, personality, and/or goals in the absence of communication. Although no communication is intended, people get signals through nonverbal behavior. Elements of interpersonal communication. The communicators. There must be at least two people involved in each communication. It's natural to think of communication as involving a message sender and a message recipient. However, the problem with this perspective is that it portrays communication as a one-way process in which one person communicates and the other receives the message. For example, while one person is speaking while the other person is listening. In reality, communications are nearly always complicated two-way processes